Hi, I'm Sonia Joins, and on behalf of the Alleghany Historical Genealogical Society, I'd like to welcome you to this episode of Alleghany Memories. The idea of Alleghany Memories is to create an archive of interviews with older folks in our area. There are no scripts. The people we feature are able to choose their interviewer and the location of the interview so that they are comfortable and able to tell their stories in their own words. If you'd like to participate or you know someone with Alleghany Memories, contact information for the Society will be posted after the program.
I'm Mayor John Miller, and it is my great honor to be with what I call the leading citizen of the town of Sparta, Mr. Amos Wagoner Jr. And at this time, Wag, we're ready for some of your stories.
Well, I thought maybe I ought to tell you a little bit about growing up here. Dalton Warren had a hardware store right on the corner across the street from where it is now. What you have in there is, Belks went in there after he left, but he had a hardware store in there, and so Absher had a shoe repair shop in the basement. And next to that was B&T Drug Company. And then they had Duncan's. At that time, the Duncans sold us our books that we had to buy to go to school for that first year. And then, of course, the state took over this book business. But at that time, you bought them through the Duncans. And of course, they needed no help in making money. But then after that, Cash and Carry took over that store there, and they had upstairs, Dr. Reeves had a dentist office and the telephone office. And there was a jewelry store and a repair shop there that, see what was his name, had that,
Evans?
Yeah.
Cliff Evans?
Cliff Evans
Yeah.
had that in there. And then next to that, they had the another store that carried ladies' and men's clothes. In that section.
Was that the Hardens?
Then the next one was the Hardens.
Yeah.
That they had a store in there, and then Ben Reeves built a theater building there. And
that's the Alleghany Jubilee today, isn't
that's
it?
Alleghany Jubilee today. And then next to that, they had a one-lane bowling lane and a restaurant there, which Jack Edwards ran, and a bus station.
And Jack is Unilee Lynn's husband, and Brian's father.
That's right. So that sort of filled the void out through there, and then next to that, Julian Reeves and them had a little store there before you got to what was then the Cass Stevens Motor Company. And then Charles Cass Stevens moved the automobile agency out there next to the school. And
tell us a little about Judy's. Judy's seemed to be the place.
Judy Womble was next to that, and he sold beer and was quite a character for the town at that time. And Judy, and he maintained himself throughout his life. And then after that, I think that this Armentrout fellow put a place in there that Max Armentrout's daddy, that you were supposed to be able to not get something to eat, but I think he called it you could take a bath there. Then we went on out the street there. The Esso people built a service station in there, which is still there as far as I know. And that place joins where Rita and Angelia Miller and Woodruff live now.
That's Governor Doughton's
old place.
Mm-hmm.
And so, John, you know, you can carry on with the rest of those places on up there if you want to.
I'd like to back up just a minute to Judy's and tell a story that's pretty famous around over the country, and that they used to gather at Judy's and have a big time. And Lewis Hampton, most of you know Lewis.
Yeah, I did.
He's a cattleman and all, but he had a couple of pigs on the back of the pickup, and they got into a big discussion and a big bet. Lewis said he could put those pigs out under the stoplight and drive them on the road all the way to Twin Oaks. Well, they got up a big bet. Back then, $100 was $100. This was back in the late 50s. And I don't know how many out there remember Booner Duncan, but Booner came and was laughing about it and told me and my wife, and we went with Booner and watched Roger, not Roger, but Lewis, put these pigs out in the street, and he had a little old whip, and he cracked that whip a time or two, and he got those pigs on the right side of the road and drove them just like he's leading people. I never saw anything like it. I've had a little experience trying to drive pigs, but he drove those all the way to Twin Oaks without any trouble at all. It was one of the darndest things I ever saw. Oh.
We had 2 farms up in Whitehead, and my daddy was a traveling salesman. He traveled for a pharmaceutical company, and he was going back to work in January 1933, and back then they didn't have proper crossings up there, and the train hit their car and killed his brother and crippled him up to where he came back here and didn't work in it for about 1.5 years, and we had to sell our farms to kind of exist back then. And then it's when he bought into the hardware business when he got able to work.
Yeah, we'd like to hear about that hardware business. It's still a going concern that your daughter Marcia is running that today, I believe. Wade, could you tell us a little about that?
Well, back when, before the hardware went in there, they had a Dodge agency right at the upper corner there, that operated in about half that building came back there. He operated that in a while, and then Smith's was another half of the hardware business, and they came all the way back down to below where Choke Motor Company is now. They bought hams, and they bought chickens, and they bought everything and resold it. And after a while, of course, they built a building, Smith's did, across the street. And Lady Beulah Hamilton was the manager there for years. So she died, and Colonel Wagoner, which was a cousin of mine, took it over as manager. And then Guy Wallace and Bain Doughton and Horton Doughton decided to operate that hardware there, and they operated it 1 year. And then my daddy bought into it, and it's been in our family ever since. I ran it there for several years, and I had good help to help me with it. And then Mike tried it for a while, and he didn't like it, so he got out. Marcia was working in Winston for a Wachovia bank, and she said, well, she wanted to get out of the banking business, so she came back up here and has been running the hardware ever since. That's about the synopsis of it.
Well, people are asking me questions about the town, the early part of the town, and I grew up in Laurel Springs, and Dad, we farmed and milked cows and all, and I didn't get to town very often, so not very often till I got to high school. We came to high school in the 8th grade and knew a little about it, but people are asking me questions about the early part of the town. Wagon, I want to ask you this one. I couldn't answer it. When Smithy's store was built, I thought it was 1937, but can you remember exactly when Smithy's store, which is now the...
No, I don't recall what the year is, but they built that store, and just below the store, they had a little, which is now the Chamber of Commerce, they had a little one-lane bowling lane in there and a restaurant in that section in there. And then Duke Bledsoe had his car agency below that in that rock building. And then he operated that for a while till Ben Reeves bought it out and put the Dodge agency in there with he and Paul Irvin. And then he ran his insurance business there up until he retired.
Well, Wag, at that time we had 3 automobile agencies. That's Chevrolet, Dodge, and
Ford.
And today we don't have any. It's amazing how things change over the years, isn't it?
That's right. Of course, there below us, there in that building way back, George Cheek and his wife had a tea room in there, and he was a lawyer, and they ran that tea room, and I guess he practiced a little law, I don't remember. Then later, they had the post office in there for a short time till Ben Reeves built a building across the street there for a post office. Then,
do you remember when they built the Northwestern Bank building up on the corner?
No, that's Sparta Bank of Sparta back then. No, I don't. That was before my time.
Wag, could you remember that fire pretty good of 33? Could you elaborate on that a little?
John, I really couldn't because I just don't remember that much about it. The 33 would be the...
I know it started over there about where the Sparta restaurant at that time was. Everybody ate at the Sparta restaurant.
Right.
And now that's no longer the case, but I understand somebody had a outdoor where there's cooking hot dogs and things, and the fire got out, the wind came up and blew and burned up the courthouse and a lot of stuff.
And the only way they could stop it from continuing on was to dynamite the barber shop.
I believe.
It's a pretty drastic.
I remember this other fire pretty good, but I don't remember that one much. I believe the fire we started again at the Sparta restaurant was it 86?
In the 80s.
1986?
In the winter.
In the winter. And it was a cold day below zero. And
yeah, I had a boy get up on top of my store building and said he would have burned it down if he hadn't been up there to throw the fire off as it came across.
Mm.
I got George Carnes, who lived in one of those apartments down there. He come up there and he just stayed on top of that building and threw that stuff off as fast as it fell on it.
Good gracious.
what do you think, Wag, in your lifetime, do you consider the difference now than when you were, say, a young fellow of 25?
What do you mean the difference?
Of the way the town is and the way things are done, people?
The town has grown. See, there wasn't, after you, the bank buildings there, and then Ben Reeves built a little a store in there which he used for a variety store, and then they turned in the post office, and then I guess Clinton Halsey must have built that other building for Jimmy Mitchell, didn't he?
The 5 and 10 cent store.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then Dr. Fox had his office there, and there was a little building in there that Sally Bledsoe used for a beauty shop, but Dr. Fox used that for his dental office till he moved to Winston, didn't he?
I think that's where the theater is now, Jeff. The building he's talking about.
The what theater?
Doing the magic shows.
I think so, in there, right close to where they have the pottery shop there.
Okay. Whenever we moved out here, I was just 4 years old. We lived down there in the old Presbyterian manse that first winter, before my daddy built this house over here where Marcia lives now. Back then you didn't have any town water. We had a well down at the end of the hall in that house, and you just went down there and cranked out your water to drink, and then the bathroom was on further down the hill. You went down there when you wanted to go to the bathroom.
Everybody had an outhouse then, didn't
That's
they?
right.
Yeah.
I told somebody that house, that Presbyterian manse, had a hall right down through the middle on the right side. My mother and I lived there on that right side, and I had an uncle lived on the left side with his 2 daughters, and then Preacher Irvin lived in the front room up there, and it had no underpinning in it, so I told several people there's air conditioning. Wind blew right up through that floor.
Yeah.
That was a cool run, and then across the street was where, you all know Joe McMillan? he had a sister that had a sister Alma, brother Johnny, and then a brother Page. All lived across down there.
Well, his
And of
sister
course, sister Bonnie still lives here, doesn't she?
Bonnie.
Yeah.
Bonnie still lives there, and you see Bonnie staying in shape, walking up and down the street. She's
Right.
probably walked 1,000,000 miles in town here.
Right.
What?
And of course, then back up this way, there, Dewey Sterling had the funeral home. And there where Donna Schumate has her office now, doesn't she?
Yeah.
We lived here, and then Herbert Singletary lived going back toward town, just past the creek there. He and his family lived there, and then Walter Blevins and his family lived in that next house, but they all moved out and went to Maryland. So I had to walk when I had to walk from here where Marcia lives now to school every day, starting when I was 5 years old.
Well, at that time, if you lived in town, you couldn't ride the school bus. You had to provide your own transportation.
They didn't have a school bus.
Didn't have one.
No, the Inskeeps and McCanns out there bought a school bus and hauled students from Roaring Gap, Sparta to school up here.
When I remember when I started school, we did have a school bus at Laurel Springs, but I think I started the first grade about 1936 or 7 at Laurel Springs. They just built a new school there, and it's still there. It was built by the WPA.
Right.
And they built a lot of buildings. They built the old, what we call the old high school building. They built the gymnasium and all, and they just did a lot of good work here in the county. And at Piney Creek, they built the gym and the school building. So through the influence, at that time, Congressman Doughton lived up at Laurel Springs. So,
whenever I went to school up there at Sparta School, the principal was Phyllis Rowe, Charlie Rowe. And he'd use a paddle on you if you needed it.
Yeah. That paddling's gone out of style. I used to use it some when I was principal, but
Mr. Rowe would use that paddle if he needed to.
1954 was a great year for me. I finished school at Appalachian. I got married and got my first job at Piney Creek. This was in 1954. And I drove the school bus. We lived at Laurel Springs at that time and drove the school bus to Piney Creek. I was the 8th grade teacher and the basketball and baseball coach. So at that time, did all kinds of work and did a little milking on the side. So looking back, now that seems a lot, but at the time, it didn't seem like all that much.
Well, after I got out, I finished high school in 1936 up here, and my daddy and mother sent me to Oak Ridge Military School right out of Kernersville, if any of you don't know where that is.
Mm-hmm.
And Wade joked. And J.T. Inskeep and I roomed together at Oak Ridge Military School. I went there 2 years and then went on to the University of North Carolina. Finished
Was there many boys from Sparta that went to Oak Ridge with you?
Nobody at that time except J.T. Inskeep. Buck Higgins was in school down there, and I guess he is responsible for me going to school down there, and then went on to the University of North Carolina.
Buck Higgins lived up there where Alleghany Fairgrounds is now, and then their family donated that land to the county for the fairgrounds.
Right.
And he was very prominent, and his father was, and
yeah, his daddy prosecuted the Japanese after the war.
For war crimes.
For war crimes, yeah.
Wade, tell us a little about you being mayor. You know, I've been mayor forever, but before I was mayor, I know that you were mayor.
Well, they appointed me for one term, and I think I finished that out, and that was about it. They had the office over there in the courthouse, the first room on the right there, and they had their meetings in there. Bob Allison and Levi Shores and Alton Thompson more or less ran the town. The mayor didn't have any more authority than any other citizen at that time. Alton Thompson more or less, I think, ran it.
Well, back 2 or 3 years ago, as a senior project, my grandson Micah wrote a history of the mayors from started in 1924.
Glenn Nichols was mayor forever.
We got to looking and trying to get information, and I asked Wag, weren't you mayor sometime? He said, yes, I was mayor, but when was that? Well, I don't remember, but to tell you the truth, I think my daddy was mayor too. I'll just tell that on you. Wasn't your daddy mayor before you were?
Yeah, my daddy was mayor once.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Yeah.
Mike donated a copy of the book to town office and to the library and maybe to the Historical Society, and I've got a copy. And as far as I know, we looked everywhere, high and low, for information.
Well, I think Glenn Nichols just took that job over and ran it himself, didn't he?
Well, according to what we could find, Glenn served about 17 years, I believe, Wade. Don't quote me on that. But then, at that time, the mayor could be the magistrate. So the magistrate paid money, and the mayor didn't. So he couldn't be both. They did a law that said couldn't be both. So he decided to take the magistrate job, and somebody else got to be the mayor. Does that sound about right?
That sounds about right, yeah.
So but we had a time, I was surprised. I looked through the Alleghany News and all, and I decided that wasn't necessarily a big job to be mayor of Sparta. But I would have to say, a good friend of mine that taught with me at Sparta School was Margaret Hawden. And it seemed when Margaret got to be the mayor, its prestige stepped up a lot. And after that, the mayor we had some pretty spirited races and all, and more interest in that. And I got to be mayor when Gene Gray was elected back in 1981. And Gene didn't like the job, so he resigned. And I had served the council there back in 77 or 78 with some of the members, and they asked me to be mayor. So I said, well, I believe I'll try it a while. And I've been mayor ever since 1982. And I have 2 more meetings, and that will be my swan song, and it's been a nice, good run. I'm proud of my service as mayor, and I'm proud to have people like Amos Wagoner Jr. in our town who knows more about it and all. Tell us how old you are, Wag.
I am 97. I was
Nice.
born December 2nd, 1919.
And I thought that I was old. I've just turned 85 and found out that Wag is 12 years older than I am.
I shed my teeth and kept my hair.
So he has meant so much to this town. Now, he won't tell you that, but
No.
if you wanted to know anything, you could go ask Wag, and he could tell you.
Well,
Now that he's gone, people ask me and expect me to know, and I don't know.
tell me about. I've heard rumors and stories about the slot machines that were on Main Street and how they help pay for the water system. Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Let's see, Wag, could you elaborate on that? I've heard all of my business just about is hearsay.
Well, they had to put the slot machines in to pay for the water and sewer business back there. But they got caught at it and had to take them out. Back then, the streets were surfaced in the middle, and we had gravel on each side there. And so you parked on that gravel, and the main streets was surfaced. But the slot machines were put in there, and Dick Gentry, he
was a town policeman.
Well, then he collected other stuff too.
Yeah, probably so.
And then
we had parking meters then, the best I remember.
Yeah. Then we had the, what was his name that was there? And never did get credit for all the work he did as a town. He was looked after the water.
Oh, that was Palier.
Yeah. I never thought he got credit for all he did.
No, he did. He was police chief. He ran the water business. He did all of that. He was really good, and he is Dallas Palier, and he's got Mike's on our town council now. Is his grandson, and I hope
I'll have to tell you a funny story.
Mike's daddy don't shoot me for not remembering his name.
Back in the early days there, we had a fellow who sold liquor out in the Bullhead section. His name was Ransom Brooks. And he had a state highway patrolman's uniform, and if you came up that mountain, he would stop you and rob you and take your money. And then he'd come to town and report on it. I'll have to tell you this story. He was a ruthless individual. As I said, he had him a state highway patrol uniform, and he had a motorcycle, and he just more or less ruled that section out there. And one time he was there in town, and I was over town, and I said to him, I said, "How about taking me to ride on that motorcycle of yours?" He said, "Get on here." Well, he turned that thing open, and that time down where today that bank is down there now, that was nothing but a baseball field.
Fifth Third, I believe, is the old Northwestern place down there.
There was a baseball field in there. We had bleachers and the whole business, and he took me down there and back, and I've never been scared in my life.
That's how it got the name of Ballpark Road. You know, it goes in behind the bank and came across it. They used to have a ballpark
right there where the bank is.
That's right.
Well, he was. They called him the Bullhead Mountain Gang, and they were pretty infamous for a long time in there.
I guess you had heard some more about that, hadn't you?
I had heard of it.
Yeah, it has. I was far removed from that, being at Laurel Springs. At that time, if you were at Laurel Springs going to Piney Creek, you came through Sparta. Then they built Highway 113 in 1950.
If you were at Laurel Springs, you'd come all the way to Sparta
and then go to Piney Creek.
Well,
rather than go through, it was a long way, it seemed like. Now, it's just 10 or 11 miles through there, but on 113. But at that time, it was a long way to get to Piney Creek from Laurel Springs. I can't ever remember when it was a dirt road from here to Laurel Springs, because I can remember when it was real narrow. But I don't ever remember when it was a dirt road. But I have heard them talking about it. I heard Miss Guy Perry that I taught with at Piney Creek talked about in the wintertime when they had the spring thaw, you couldn't get to town. It was so muddy and all, you just couldn't get there. Edna Perry, yes. She was a fine old soul, for sure.
Well, I went in the service in 1940. They had Pearl Harbor, 41, and I had to go in service in 42, so I spent 4 years in the Army Air Force during that time.
Where were you stationed?
Well, I'll tell you the story on that. Of course, Pearl Harbor, and then right after that, in January, they started taking all the men who weren't married. On January the 7th, I think it was, they sent me and 21 other people down to Charlotte to get physicals. And we came back, and of course all law was passed. Well, there's 3 of us who'd had a little experience with this
ROTC.
ROTC,
yeah.
And we didn't want to crawl on our bellies. So we went back to Charlotte and enlisted in the Army Air Force, and they were opening a new base in Columbia, South Carolina. Out there, they didn't have a formal airport, it was just an airstrip. So we enlisted for that, so Wade Choate, Wade McMillan, and myself, all 3 enlisted to go there to that base. Well, when we got down there, we slept in tents and on the ground for the first 3 or 4 months. We made big money back then. The first few months we got $21 a month. And then they got to $45 a month, and then after $56 a month, and that was about as high as it got unless you got a little rank. Well, Wade Choate, we got a job up at the airstrip for the night lighting. So he had trucks up there that lit the runway for the boys to practice to fly those B-25s. We had B-25 bombers in there. And Wade McMillan got a job in the telephone office. And I went to work in the base headquarters and became assistant sergeant major there at the base later. But the first few months it was pretty crude. We, as I said, I'd say the first month we all slept on the ground in tents. And then they built these little cardboard buildings and put an old stove in there that held coal. And they were tents. We just slept in those for a long while. But after I got in headquarters, along with my two friends, George Nolan and Forrest Case, we got tied in up to base headquarters, and we got us a room up there at base headquarters. We never did have to stay down there anymore.
I think it's worth noting here that Wade was David Choate's father, and David still is associated with the Choate Motor Company.
That's right.
And Wade was his father.
Oh, Wade married Louise while we were stationed there.
What? Wade, it might be worthwhile.
I'll have to tell you this, and then you'll know. The General Doolittle came there at our base, and he trained these boys on flying those B-25s that they eventually used to
bomb Tokyo, didn't he?
That's right.
Yeah.
General Doolittle, I remember the day he came in there at headquarters. He always had a cane he walked with. He didn't need it, but I guess he used it for defense.
Yeah.
He came in there. He's the cockiest little fella you about ever saw. But the sergeant major was, back then they didn't have an Air Force. It was Army Air Force. It didn't become an Air Force individually until after World War II. But he came in there, and the sergeant major, who was in charge, took him right into the adjutant's office, and then, of course, on back to the colonel. And we didn't know what they were up to, but they'd get up there on those airplanes at night, and I remember Wade Choate used to say they're going to tear those damn airplanes up. But they'd rev those, put the brakes on those B-25s, and rev them up just as wide open as they go, and then turn them loose, go down that runway to take off. Of course, they were practicing getting off of an aircraft carrier to bomb Japan.
Well, I guess an interesting story. I think that we'd be interested in telling us a little about your family. You hadn't even hardly mentioned them. We mentioned Marcia and Mike, but we'd like to hear a little about your lovely wife.
Well, I had about the sweetest wife anybody could have. Doris was very intelligent. She was pretty. She had an excellent mother and father. I can't tell you how much I miss her even to this day, but
how long did you all stay married?
We were married 62 years.
62 years. And she was a lovely woman. I remember her well, and I remember.
She had a lot of sickness during her lifetime, but she put up with it. But she helped me here at this house. She helped me pour the concrete downstairs. She helped mow the yard. She tended the garden. She cooked for me. She did everything that a wife could do to make me happy. She raised two children, Mike and Marcia, and they've both been very good children. Mike didn't like the hardware business, and of course, I told somebody the worst mistake I ever did with Mike was send him to college. He went to Boone, and Doris gave him a chair to sit in up there, a soft chair. What she thought studying the first weekend he came home, the guy living with us on drugs, and he set the room on fire. So he had to move out from that. And
I remember that Mike and my number 2 son, Greg, were real buddies and have remained buddies all their life.
right. You didn't never tell us, how did Greg make out during that flood down there?
Well, my son Greg had 2 Midas shops in the city of Houston. And of course the flood was right on top of him. And he happened to live in a high rise, and his vehicles were up in the air. And he said it was amazing how little damage he had in his stores, so he felt really good about that.
Well, that's great. I never heard anybody say whether he got to his place or not.
But this flood business has been something else, hasn't it?
Yes, it sure has.
It makes you glad to live in Alleghany County. We don't seem to have earthquakes and hurricanes and tornadoes. And one time we had so much open land we didn't have many forest fires, but it seemed like our county's growing up now to me as riding around it.
Well, I'll have to tell you about the 1940 flood. I just got out of school, and we caught these boys taking stuff out of that. They'd taken, back at that time, we sold those ringer type washers, and I had a couple of boys working up there, and they were stealing those washing machines and taking them out and selling them at night. So my daddy sent me up there to work that summer till he could get things straightened out. Well, that was the year of the 1940 flood. Well,
was this up in West Jefferson?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I delivered a lime spreader down to Walter Brown's store right down there on the river, right next to where the low water bridge is now. On one day, and the river got up, and the next day or two, and washed that. He left that lime spreader I sold him down there in the field, and it washed it away, and washed that road out completely. From there, where you turn off till you got up there to the other road that goes across the hill, and so there wasn't any way of getting back up that river. And we had a highway commissioner back there then that I knew pretty well. And I took him up there one day, and he got the state to reopen that road. So that's how that road got reopened.
I think in our lifetime and my father's lifetime, we had 2 great floods. The 1916 flood and the 1940 flood.
Right.
And the 40 flood, I've heard them talk about it. All the mills and all grist mills and corn they ground and all that were pretty well washed away. And where Congressman had lived at Laurel Springs, and it's Downton Hall now, and just right up the creek there a little, they had a grist mill. Jacob Miller had a grist mill, and it washed away. And
that was in 1940.
That was 1940.
Well, that's kind of a flat area right through there and kind of low.
It came down by that house, and those grindstones that they ground flour and corn with are still buried over there in Metaphor Creek. Yeah.
Well, where that low water bridge is down there next to the campground now, they had a ferry there. You just go there, and this fellow Fitzgerald across the river had a house there, and he'd bring his boat across the river and pick you up and take you back across. Yeah, that was some some water through there then.
What about the electricity? When did the Richardsons, when did they bring electricity to the town?
My wife's daddy lived down there on the river.
Clennell was his name, Clennell?
Clennell Richardson lived
Yeah.
down there on the river, and he ran they had a dam across there, of course, and he would make electricity there. They'd have enough electricity to have it probably 2 hours a night, and that was about all until the Blue Ridge Electric took it over, or they called it what it was. They didn't want Blue Ridge Electric, and it was a crowd of Elkin that bought it to start with.
I remember my father was pretty much of a jack of all trades, and knew how to do everything.
He sure did.
And he had a Delco that he made electricity for us. We had enough for a few light bulbs and a refrigerator. And this was before the county was electrified.
Was that
At
hired by the creek, or what'd you?
No, a Delco plant.
Gasoline.
Gasoline.
A generator.
Yeah, and a generator.
John's daddy had more talents than about anybody I knew, and he didn't fail to use them. He knew how to do it, and he'd work at it. When I lived in West Jefferson, he used to come there and trade with me, and I would look forward to him because he'd have something new on his mind every time he came.
I sometimes wonder if he ever got the recognition he deserved. Of course, the people in Laurel Springs thought of him as really fine, and he carried the mail and had a service station there at the Laurel Springs, where Laurel Springs post office is now, but Congressman Dowden owned that and kept it going there for a long time. Well, Wag, if we were going to close up, what's the last thing that you're going to say?
Well, I don't know. I think it's nice the way that Sparta has maintained itself and has made some growth. I think about the building out there beyond where the Dollar Mart is, where Betty's Dollar Mart, and all that development out through there, the motel, and all those things are a real asset to our community, and I'm just glad that they've happened on it.
And a new school and everything out that direction. And
That's exactly right.
New high schools, and I feel like that we've made a lot of progress, but our future is ahead of us. I think the next 50 years are going to be greater than the last 50 years. I really believe that.
Alleghany Memories is a production of the Alleghany Historical Genealogical Society and is brought to you with support from Alleghany Opportunity Fund, a component fund of the North Carolina Community Foundation, and with the help of Alleghany Community Television. For more information on Alleghany Memories, the Alleghany Historical Museum, or Alleghany Historical Genealogical Society, please visit us online at ahgs.org.